Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vagan Radian here at the Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada, one of the world's truly great security conferences. Our coverage here is sponsored by Boeing and Leonardo DRS, and we're speaking with the Deputy Prime Minister of Latvia, Dr. Artis Pabriks. Sir, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you for joining you.
It's an honor and pleasure. Why are conferences like this important from your perspective? You know, it's an extraordinary event, but what are you getting out of this by participating in it?
Well, first of all, if we want to get smarter, we have to meet and talk and think. Secondly, for us Latvians, Halifax is particularly important because for last years, Canada is a lead nation amongst the NATO nations, which also has its presence in Latvia. And so we have here bilateral talks, and we are looking forward for deepening our relationship, not only with people who represent their countries here as far as security and defense, but particularly with Canadians.
It truly is a magnificent conference, and it's always an honor to participate. Let me take you to comments by French President Emmanuel Macron about the brain-dead nature of the alliance, particularly for the Baltic nations. NATO is an important lifeline, a strategic connection, not just to its European partners, but also to the United States. To listen to him explain it, it's, if you stick to the headline, it's very, very jarring, but his underlying message was, NATO has to get its act together, it has to accelerate its game, but also we as Europeans have to be better prepared to stand up for our own security in the event the United States does not engage to defend Europe in the event of a future conflict. But his comments, while maybe intended to be constructive, also annoyed a lot of people. From a Latvian perspective, how did you view his comments?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that NATO is not brain dead, obviously not. Yes, we do have challenges, and I think what Emmanuel Macron was asking about, these are the correct questions because they can't be wrong questions, but I think many of his suggestions were probably not exactly acceptable from our side, because that medicine what he offers, we don't think is totally correct, because we could read it in a different way. If we read it in a way that Europeans should devote more attention to security, to defense, to pay more for our security and be combat ready, yes, we are for that, because my country is also paying 2% for defense from our GDP, and we still think it's not enough, because we are a border country, and in many ways our border, it is EU and NATO border. So from that perspective, yes. On the other hand, we could feel here in this discussion or interview with French president that he would like to ease sanctions for Russia, just giving or asking nothing in return. There was no strengthening ideas of strengthening transatlantic ties, because we still think that even if we have to invest more as Europeans, we should do everything possible to keep this lifeline, this transatlantic alliance between Europeans and Americans as strong as ever, if we want to deter also rising China or something like this. And I also think that strategically his understanding that, look, we have to engage with Russians just because otherwise they will be engaged with Chinese is not strategically correct, because Russians are not stupid. And they understand that they are the smallest brothers of Chinese. So that means that if they do not want to lose their sovereignty and many other things, by, for instance, engaging with Huawei, by doing other stuff as far as security matters for Russia, they might actually, earlier or later, turn towards Europe and the West to get more aligned with us.
Are you satisfied, though? There were a lot of questions about America's reliability, questions that were not being asked some years ago that are being asked now. There are folks who look at, for example, Washington's decision regarding the Kurds and say, well, that was a very close ally that lost tens of thousands of people to fight a common enemy, and yet the United States abandoned him. Washington changed its position a little bit, so it's not going to be a full retreat, but obviously Turkey and Russia are now in a very important part of the Middle East in a more entrenched fashion. Is there certitude from the Latvian perspective that in the event of a crisis, the United States is going to be there right alongside, as well as other of your European allies will be along, or rather I should say the alliance as a whole will be there?
Latvians do not have doubt about Americans, because the historic record of American institutions and American attitude towards the Baltic state and Latvia was always security and reliance. So Americans never betrayed us. Of course, the current situation with modern media, with social media, with Twitters, sometimes makes people around the world confused that some political decisions are made like this. But we still believe in American general approach to the world affairs. We believe in American institutions, and we believe also in American military might. And if we have to choose to stand with Americans in the event of crisis or to stand with somebody else, I think this choice is definitely on the American side, particularly because many of Europeans during the last decades were not developing their military capabilities. So even if we have a good friendship, there's nobody who really could contribute, or there's not many who could contribute.
Is the faith with the United States, or is it the faith with the NATO alliance as a whole?
Well, up to now, NATO alliance has been also always reliable to us. And I would like to say that we trust NATO alliance fully as well. We of course understand that NATO alliance consists of number of countries, so we have to, let's say, be aware about different political events in each of the member countries. But up to now, we had no whatsoever problems, neither with alliance in general, nor with United States as a largest supporter for us within the alliance.
NATO has been working to adjust to move more quickly to better deter Russia, but also move more quickly to build kind of capabilities and also be a more resilient and responsive alliance. Do you feel that? And what's the Latvian advice to the alliance to actually improve its capability?
Well, in many ways, we are standing on the same line as the United States within alliance, because we really think that some of European nations, first of all, should be more aware about threats. And here Baltic countries comes in, because we think that if we, for instance, analyze any hypothetical threats from the Russian side, and our Latvian analysis at this moment is not different, not only from other Baltic countries' analysis or Polish analysis, but it's almost the same of that analysis done by Sweden or Finland or Norway. So actually all the Northern European region is thinking the same way. And from that perspective, I would say Baltic countries are a litmus test for anything which is happening or in the nearest future can happen with other allied countries in the Western or Central Europe. Either we speak about cyber attacks or we speak about strategic communication. And here I would say that we in the Baltics, we always have been advanced in that sense that we could always detect what would be those first challenges. Look, 2007, first cyber attacks in Estonia. What Estonians did, they created a NATO Excellence Center for cyber. In Latvian case, we have been very much, I would say, abused by different fake news and media misuse on the Russian side. So what was our answer? We created a highly competitive center of excellence of NATO for strategic communication. In Lithuania, the same was done with the Center of Excellence for Energy. All the three issues are highly important for all Europeans, for all NATO alliance. So I think we can give, in fact, in many ways, advice how to act in such situations, and this gives additional value to us within alliance.
Does Russia become potentially more dangerous as Putin comes under pressure, under domestic protests? Because if you look at it in 2014, there were demonstrations, and one of the reasons why Putin moved into Ukraine was to try to change the dynamic. Does the chance of Russian adventurism go up in this period, do you think?
Well, we never can exclude this, because governments in Russia, as far as history teaches us, has been mainly changing because of either coups or revolutions. So in that sense, if the owners of government, of power in Russia doesn't feel safe, they're looking for different ways how to decrease the pressure. One of our I would say concerns at this moment, also looking to geopolitics, of course, is not only Ukraine, but also Belarus. So we would like to see that Belarus is remaining as a stable country, as an independent country. So we can't exclude any kind of external maneuvers from the Russian side. But we also must be aware that even if we are now claiming that under the Putin's governance, Russia has been less reliable and less trustworthy. We should not expect and should not be naive that even if the government changes in Russia, it doesn't immediately mean that that government will be more friendly to the West than Putin is.
Do you think that democracy can come to Russia? We talked to Mikhail Kasyanov, who is the People's Freedom Party chief. Last year he told me there are going to be big demonstrations and Putin's going to come under pressure. That's actually, at the time, everybody said he was a little crazy to say that, but it's happening. He's confident that change will come, even though that process will take time. As somebody who's a neighbor who watches that scene closely, do you think that kind of a change is possible and coming from Russia?
Look, nothing is eternal, and of course there will be changes. The question is what kind of turmoil and instability such kind of changes will bring to the neighbors. That's the first question what we have to answer, because we are a neighboring country. For us, differently from, let's say, French, Spanish or some other countries, this is existential threat. This is not something less money or more money. For us, it's existential. Secondly, about democracy in Russia, allow me to be a little bit more skeptical. If we think about such type of liberal democracy as exists in the European continent, in North America, I don't think that we should expect such type of democracy in Russia in the nearest time, because Russia has been developing according to different historic paths. It has different historic elements which determined its politics. So there could be more democracy or less democracy, but Russia was never a traditional Western country differently from us. So I remain skeptical because I don't see a critical mass for this in Russia, despite of demonstrations, despite of opposition. But opposition by itself not always means that will be a Western type of regime afterwards.
Last two questions. One, what's the best way to counter and fight disinformation from your perspective? Second, what's the best way to deter Russia as a country that's shared a border with Russia for millennia?
Well, first, it's difficult to answer, but I would say we have to educate citizens. We must be advanced in technologies, and in this case I think Latvia is one of the good examples. We have the third fastest internet in the world, so we must use social media also in a way that we can detect where there are bots, where there are cyber attacks. We should have much better control of larger corporations like Facebook or Instagram, because when through their channels are coming different fake news or false accounts or etc., it's extremely difficult to make them act. And I think this is the way how we should rather work better together between these big corporations or institutions and state governance. And of course we must be capable also, as far as the cyber attacks, to deter them. So that means we must not leave our democracy in the hands of media which is controlled by authoritarian regimes. So it's a bunch of things what we could do, and this cannot be done just by one country, so that's very important. To deter Russia, look, we as a neighboring country, we are probably the most interested that Russia is stable, as much as possible democratic and prosperous, because we can benefit from such a neighbor. At the same time, we can't live in a wishful thinking like some of our partners sometimes live. So we must be realist, and realist language frequently requires also a tough talk. It requires also to tell the truth before the problem comes, and this is our duty to do this. In general, I would judge Russians as a smart people, as a smart government. They know the weaknesses of others, and they will misuse these weaknesses. So we have to stay strong. We must also show that we are strong, because Russians are respecting strengths, and then we can come to the common conclusions and maybe also much better agreements.
And next phase of your defense plan in terms of bolstering your own capability, Latvia spends a lot of money per capita on defense.
We will continue to spend our 2%. We are engaged now into creation of comprehensive defense system, which means involvement of all society, of our industries, and that basically means that we want to stand stable on two legs. The one is international solidarity, NATO, fifth paragraph, etc. Another leg is, as a small country, we want to be as a hedgehog, which means that if you touch us, you will bite your fingers, because the price you will pay to invade us will be much larger than the benefits you will gain by occupying us.
One last question, China. How does the alliance need to think about China at a time when it's trying to increase its footprint, its access, its cyber surveillance? information that it's probably sharing with the Russians as well?
Well, Benjamin Franklin was right. Either we stick together or we will hang separately.
Dr. Artis Pabriks, who is the Deputy Prime Minister of Latvia. Sir, thanks very much. Very much enjoyed the conversation.
Thank
and
you.
Thanks very much for the American history lesson.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.